Hold on. All right, welcome everyone to the second webinar in the Remote Interpreter webinar series, 4 free webinars. And as many of you know and may have attended, the first one was last week, a week ago today, presented by Catherine Allen, which gave kind of the big picture. And today we have the great good fortune of having an absolute expert on how to set yourself up as a remote interpreter, which is something that Carolyn Raymer, our presenter, will be writing about as well for the Remote Interpreter textbook, for which we have 2 authors besides Carolyn also present. As you can see, Tatiana Sestari and Danielle Mather, and they have been writing away. So hello, everyone. I'm Marjorie Bancroft. I am the Director of Cross-Cultural Communications, and I have this is an organization that's been around for almost 20 years, 20 years this November. We are the leading national training agency for community and medical interpreting. And we are also the ones who will be coming out with this remote interpreter textbook, because we publish textbooks and training manuals that are sold in 30 countries and all 50 US states. We are welcoming to you to this, the second webinar, as I said, in this series. We will be watching out for your Q&A, and we know there will be a lot of you coming on with Q&A, and therefore we are going to ask you to keep the chat feature for your general comments and general questions, keeping in mind that the default setting for chat is just to us panelists, the presenter and the panelists, and the hosts, if you will. So you'll have to change that default setting to everyone if you want it to go out to anyone besides us. So use your chat for general questions or comments. But if you are wanting to ask questions to Carolyn during the last 15 minutes, the Q&A part of this webinar, then please use, in the bottom of your screen, you can find the Q&A feature, and use that specifically for questions you would like me to pose to Carolyn during the Q&A period. As a reminder, we won't be able, we saw this last time, there are hundreds of people attending from all over the world. And I think we had 26 countries last time, Carolyn.
Wow. Yes,
and so if we don't answer your questions, there are 2 more webinars coming, and you can see 2 of the presenters right now. Also, if you are looking for CEUs for CCHI or ATA, please send us an email at info@cultureandlanguage.net. One of our staff members will write that email in the chat right now. And if you want to stay on for a few minutes after our presenter leaves, if you have questions for me about cross-cultural communications or anything to do with us, I'll be happy to answer them after the webinar ends. Without further ado, I am going to pass the baton on to Carolyn. You are in expert hands. She runs the whole interpreter side of Boost Lingo. She will introduce herself. She has a fascinating background. Listen carefully. Have fun with our audience, Carolyn, and let us know if you need us to do anything.
Thank you, Marjorie, and thank you, my fellow co-authors of this amazing project that we're working on, for being here as well. And thank you to the audience, obviously. Let me share my screen, get the slides up here. Let's see. All right, should be good to go. Marjorie, let me know if it doesn't look right. Okay, so I'll get started here. So this series we sort of introduced, Catherine introduced last week in her overview, but I wanted to sort of touch on how it came about again, just quickly. So we started writing, you know, this team of writers who are in the interpretation or the language industry in general. This book called The Remote Interpreter, and you know, we had planned to finish it this week soon, but we weren't able to. Once COVID started, we weren't able to get everything out as quickly as we had hoped, and we were really wanting to get the information out there to you interpreters as quickly as possible. So we haven't finished writing the book, but we have a lot of great content already. So this is how we're kind of sharing it, before the book is published. So you kind of get a sneak peek. So a little quick intro to who I am. I work at Boostlingo. I am the Director of Language Access there. Boostlingo is a unified interpreting platform, so it does on-site scheduling, over the phone interpretation, VRI, video remote interpretation, and it has business management tools as well. What I do is manage our network of interpreters that work solely remotely. So that's kind of my area of expertise, is managing remote interpreters. So how did I get here? My background is in humanities. So I have a master's in peace and conflict studies that I got when I was living in Spain. So I spent most of my undergrad and college years and master years in Spain studying there, and inevitably ended up doing a lot of translation and interpretation work while I was there, just to kind of earn money on the side. And I did some formal trainings there as well for medical interpretation. So the climate's a little different in Spain. I'm not CHI, but I did do a lot of interpreting. So when I came back to the United States, I kind of wanted to use my language skills still, got into social work, ended up doing working with older adults, Spanish-speaking immigrants, and then transitioned into the role I'm in now. So I'm really excited to be where I am. I love this industry. It's great. I love interpreters. So thank you all for being here. And I will continue. So let's see, the agenda kind of for today and the learning objectives, because this is the training series that we designed so that interpreters would get specific objectives out of it. Today we're going to go through sort of a step-by-step process to set yourself up for OPI and VRI assignments using just a standard current remote interpreting technology platform. We're also going to learn how to conduct a session using an interpreting platform that's common and current. And then we'll go through sort of a checklist of potential tech or logistical problems that might come up in remote interpreting and how you can address those. So I want you to kind of visualize, imagine you are in your home office, sitting at your desk, computer in front of you. What steps do you need to take before signing on and going online to do a remote interpreting session? First, we're kind of going to go through some of the general.
Carolyn?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems that somehow your PowerPoint and you have become reversed. So we're seeing the PowerPoint small and you big.
Oh.
And I have not seen that particular interesting feature before. So I would suggest you stop screen share and just do it over again.
Okay, let me see what the deal is with that. Sorry, everybody.
There are always the internet gremlins ready to jump, and it's always something you haven't quite, not always, but it's usually something you haven't seen before that happens.
So you're seeing my face very big?
And the PowerPoint tiny, so just the reverse of the normal view when you share a PowerPoint.
Let's see.
I just wanted to say, Carolyn, it was fine on my screen, so I don't think everyone is seeing the same thing.
Oh.
But I was seeing it that way. So it wasn't just some people.
Okay, let me see if I do presenter view first and then screen share.
No, well, maybe, I don't know. That's a good question.
Well, I don't think it will let me do that actually, so here.
Oh, that's good that it knows not to do that. Okay.
Try the screen share. Are people in the chat seeing that as well? I want to make sure people are seeing the right thing.
In Q&A, we've had we had 2 comments about it. Yeah, and there's other comments in chat. They're seeing you.
Okay.
Now we see you. Now we see you small and the screen big. So if you share now, it should be okay. Okay. Yep, we're good.
Now it's okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Thanks for.
And Chad is saying also, so it's not just me. You're good. Go.
Good. Okay. Thank you for thanks for letting me know that. Sorry for the little technical glitch there, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us. Yeah. So I was just kind of going through here some of the things that you should visualize when you're first getting set up. So we went through already what we're going to be doing and learning today. So let's move on to the next slide. So the basics. Basically, I wanted to sort of define these terms before moving forward, just because not everybody knows. I know some people are like, oh yeah, I already know what that is, but I never know given the audience. So what is remote interpreting? It's defined as a telecommunication service that uses devices such as web cameras or video phones to provide sign language or spoken language interpreting services. And what is over the phone interpreting? So over the phone using audio, you can use it in different platforms. You can use a landline, you can use an in-browser app. There's different versions of this, but it's OPI stands for over the phone. Video remote interpreting is the same thing, but you have the visual, you have the camera, so you're able to see, and it's most popular among signed language, but it's also becoming very popular with spoken languages, especially now that a lot of times the doctor and the patient, or just as an example, should not be in the same place. So telehealth is really in need of that layer of technology. So what are some differences between interpreting in a remote setting and interpreting on site? I didn't do any polls here for this, but if you want to just type in the chat box what you kind of think, it would be great to hear and know later on after the presentation, just kind of some perceived notions of it. For me, when I'm training remote interpreters, and this is not to say that it's the same, but I always try to outline to remote interpreters that the mentality, whether you're working from your home office or you're working on site, should stay the same. You should have the same standards, the same protocols, the same code of ethics when it comes to interpretation, and we'll get into that a bit further down the presentation. So some things that you most definitely need to be a remote interpreter are the equipment. So you'll need obviously a working computer. You can also use a stationary tablet, depending on the platform and what the language company recommends that you use. In the network that I manage, we recommend use of the web application, just because it's more hardwired using Wi-Fi, and you can have some network volatility when it comes to using mobile devices at times. But yeah, just so you're aware of what you can use to be interpreting remotely. Definitely a noise canceling headset with a microphone. Definitely discourage the use of computer microphones and the use of earbud headphones, just because they're not as robust, and they don't block out the noise as well. And then a neutral background, blank, so something that you can purchase online on Amazon. I recommend a lot of times to my network is a chair mounted background, because it's easy to just put up, and then it makes the space that you're interpreting in look completely clean and professional. And then this goes hand in hand, but confidential, clean environment. So ideally, you're going to want to use a home office with you definitely need a closed door. You don't want to be surrounded by screaming babies or dogs. And you want to be able to lock the door because of HIPAA compliance, which we'll get into. And then, of course, you need a good internet speed. So fiber optic is usually what I recommend. So I wanted to bring up a few more equipment recommendations, and if you guys are not understanding some of the terms here, or if you have any specific questions, we can always go over that during Q&A. I'm not, just to give you guys a understanding, I'm not in IT, I'm not a tech person, but I do know kind of what the requirements are for being a remote interpreter, and I'll do my best to field your questions at the end of the presentation. So, for example, you should always try to avoid sort of lower end older computers. That's kind of obvious, but AMD computers that use all-in-one APU processors, they often not have enough horsepower to provide the best audio or video quality, especially. For example, while you're in a VRI call that has poor quality, if you notice that you have a self-view window that doesn't display a smooth video feed of yourself, the odds are that your computer is struggling to keep up with the webcam's video processing demands. This can happen when your computer graphics processor isn't adequate for real-time video conferencing applications. Another indicator that your computer isn't up to snuff is that your CPU usage is also really high, or you see a lot of CPU spikes, either in general or while on a VRI call. Using a computer when you have better graphics and processing capabilities will definitely help solve that issue. Don't get too overwhelmed. I have a lot of equipment recommendations here. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight things that you should try to pay attention to when you're setting up your home office. As a VRI interpreter, I would definitely say invest in an HD webcam. Some of the webcams that do come built into laptops and some desktops often don't have like quite the speed or quality that is needed for VRI, especially. Sometimes the frame rates drop off unless you have enough light in the room, and this is something we'll go over a little bit later, lighting. It'll also cause video trailing, splotches, artifacts, and sometimes what you've probably noticed in just using computers is yellowing of the subjects. It'll be kind of blurry. So yeah, you want to try to invest in a high definition webcam, external webcam, and those I can give you specifics for after the presentation as well. Something else to consider and to pay attention to is the audio. It's really, really important, just as important to look nice on the camera, but to also have your voice be clear and intelligible. You're interpreting, meaning, you're interpreting very important messages, over the phone or on BRI. So you need to be able to hear the client or the user, and they need to be able to hear you perfectly clear as well. So investing in a set of headphones with external microphone is recommended. This offers better sound, cuts down on background noise that your computer microphone is more likely to pick up. It also helps reduce speaker feedback. And then if you're not wearing headphones while chatting online, your computer microphone picks up the other person's voice from the speakers and creates feedback loop. I've seen this a lot. So yeah, invest in some good noise canceling headphones with microphone. All right. So the technology. So this is always a little scary for people at first when they're getting set up to do a remote interpreting session for the first time. There are terms that people haven't heard of. There are tests that people are recommended to take and they don't know what they mean necessarily, which it's okay. Don't worry about it. I'm going to try to explain it to you to the best of my ability, but just want to point out that a lot of times when you are doing a remote interpreting session, call connection issues are because of either a camera or microphone browser permission issue or a poor network connection. So it's incredibly important that you stop and close other applications that might be using up your bandwidth. And then also, if you do have a network related issue, you should definitely be running speed and bandwidth tests. Here are some examples of the ones I recommend to remote interpreters. And then depending on if you're using a Mac or a PC, use the task manager on your computer to make sure that other applications aren't taking up your computer space while you're interpreting. Usually we recommend, and this is for all platforms are going to be a little bit different, RI platforms, but you should always try to make sure that you have a standard upload of 100 kilobits per second for audio, and then 1500 kilobits per second for video. So that's just kind of the standard that we run by. So device management recommendations for your computer specifically. We always recommend going offline. Each RI platform is different. I can't say that enough, but for Boostlingo specifically, you have to go in and click to go online when you're using the web application. So definitely go offline when you're not actually in front of your computer or ending your shift. And then I would say definitely consult whoever is your support person for using the technology, whether it's the language company or somebody at the IT company. Ask them before installing any other applications or antivirus that might create firewalls or barriers to using the technology. And then pretty straightforward, but just, follow your PC or your Mac maintenance best practices, keep up with security and other updates, properly close applications, restart your PC or your Mac periodically. All right. There we go. So this is just kind of a visual of what video versus audio looks like on a standard RI platform. You'll be able to differentiate, obviously, between when a video call is coming in or when an audio call is coming in. Each platform is different, obviously, but they'll show you, here, for example, it's blue and you can see the little camera sign, and here it's yellow and you can see the little microphone symbol. Click to answer is pretty standard, and then here you see a camera. The interpreter would be there. And then here there's no visual because it's just an audio call. Yeah, and then these are some feature things that you should pay attention to when you're learning a new RI platform. You should know how to obviously differentiate between a video or an audio call. You should also know how to connect your audio and camera permissions before you're answering the call, specifically in the browser that you are designated to be using. So for Boostlingo, it's Firefox or Google Chrome, and in those browsers, you have to go the top left of the browser and allow the application to use your camera and microphone permissions before answering calls. And then it's always good to know where the mute button is on a platform, and then also there's not listed here, but privacy mode. So a lot of times the patient will want you to will want to be in privacy mode, or the interpreter, and so they'll close off their camera temporarily during a session. So good things to look out for. This is kind of what the call flow looks like. Sorry for the pictures are not so great, but this is a current platform. So this is the web application, the web version. So this is on a Google Chrome browser. So you're currently on it, and then you have your little soft phone here, or your caller. It's kind of hard to see, but you can click app or web to answer on the app or the web. But you can also click here to route it to your cell phone or landline. So there's that option. And then you click in the center to go offline, as well as to go online. So here this is you waiting for a call to come in. And then call comes in, that's you, the interpreter, and that's what you would see as the client. And then here's just an example of if it were more than one or two people in a session. Also, I want to point out, I didn't think to point this out before, but some platforms, they have the chat feature that you can use to chat with a client if needed. And then, yeah, there's other features as well, but I won't go too much into detail because each platform is different. So let's see. Let's go over some of the best practices that you should always sort of live by as a remote interpreter. And I'm sorry if some of them sound really obvious, but managing a network of more than 6,000 interpreters, I've seen everything. So I always mention these things just because you never know, and people should always just be reminded. So don't ever answer a call in a public place. It's a violation of HIPAA compliance, and it also is really unprofessional. And you're not sure of the network you're using. If you're in a Starbucks, the internet isn't. You don't know what the network is, so it's not secure. So there's always that. So it's always good to remember, answer in a private space where you trust the internet. When answering remote calls, you should always dress professionally. We recommend solid colors just for because that's what the camera seems to like. For video calls, make sure your background is neutral. So you don't want to see any photos, posters, windows. If there are windows, you need to have the blinds closed. And then, yeah, no clutter. That's going to be a distraction to anybody in the call. And then typical greeting for a remote interpreter it's for a formal greeting. This is the one I tell my network to use. Hi, hello, my name is Caroline. I'm your Spanish interpreter. ID number 123456. How may I help you? That's just kind of a standard right before your pre-session. And then the session continues. So you should always also remember, and I always like to highlight this, that even though you're in your home office, maybe you're wearing your pajamas from the waist down, which is fine. It's always important to remember the mentality should not change when you are doing a remote session. You still have to be professional. You still have to follow standards and professionalism and code of ethics. Speaking of compliance, I always like to go over what this stands for and what this means, because not everybody will know what this is. If you're not from the States, maybe not from the United States, you don't know what this is, but it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It sets a standard for sensitive patient data protection, and it's important that companies deal with protected health information, so PHI. They must have a physical network and process security measure in place and follow them to ensure HIPAA compliance. So each individual interpreter in my network has their own HIPAA compliance proof of HIPAA compliance training that has to be validated every 2 years. So it ensures that they're following the protocols and standards of HIPAA compliance, and that also they understand what they mean, and it's just a layer of accountability for the interpreter to follow protection of sensitive patient data. So we're halfway through now. I'm paying attention to time here. I created basically sort of this checklist for you guys because I was envisioning how would this be easiest for me to remember everything if I want to take a look at this later and just go through and check off the boxes. How would it be easiest for me? This is kind of how I thought it would be easier. So these are some of the steps I created. So the first step I chose, and you don't have to do these in any particular order. Just make sure you do all of them before you're actively doing a session. You should definitely choose a HIPAA compliance workspace, so private, secure. It should be dedicated, so you shouldn't be using your bathroom. You shouldn't be using your laundry room. I know this seems obvious, but I've seen it all, so I always like to mention that. Then pay close attention to noise. You shouldn't hear any distracting background noise. And then the backdrop also, you should have a wall mounted or chair mounted, untextured and completely neutral background. And we have some recommendations for exactly what you can, where to get those backdrops and what to do with them. So we can give you that information as well. And then, you know, it's ready your space. You wanna be comfortable. You wanna have, you know, your water, your notepad, your pen, any reference materials you might need, maybe a sweater if it's cold, a chair that helps you have good posture. I don't have the best posture, but yeah, it's always good to pay attention to those things as you're getting ready. Yeah, so also really important, keep the door shut when you're interpreting. It should lock also. Windows should have blinds that are closed. You should have a system to destroy any sort of notes that you took during the session. So whether a shredder or another mode to, if you're typing out notes on another device, maybe you delete those, for example. So yeah, that's my step one. Step two, check and double check your technology. So it's always really important before going online to review any sort of hardware or software information and test your webcam, speakers, microphone. There are online tests you can use that I will send along with these slides at the end of the presentation that show you how to check any webcam, speakers, microphone. But obviously, if you're using an external webcam or an external microphone or external speakers, you're going to have to follow the protocol that goes, or the instructions that go along with those. Just remember to check them before you go online. And then really important, review and check internet speed, bandwidth recommendations. So I gave a few tests that I recommend, speed tests, network tests, that kind of thing. And then make sure your browser is set up to allow camera and microphone permissions as well. And then, yeah, close out any applications that might interfere with your internet speed. I usually like to close out Skype, for example, because I've found that it interferes with my camera permissions. Things like that are important to pay attention to. Lights. So one surefire way to hurt your video quality is to sit with your back to a window or a bright light. When light is shining towards your back and into the camera lens, it makes everything in the foreground, so you show up really dark. By turning your computer so that you're side lit or front lit, you can vastly improve the picture. And it's also important to note that truly good video consists of a subject bathed in natural light that originates from behind the camera. So setting up your chat in front of an open sunny window is one way to achieve this effect. But if you have a hard time controlling the light at your location, you can always create fake natural lighting, using a lamp, for example. Okay, so step 4, camera. Basically, apart from giving yourself a background, cameras love context. So leaning against a wall while chatting online might feel comfortable, but it makes it harder for the person on the other end of the conversation to draw visual perspective. So you should always try to choose a wall or background that offers some contrast without being overly busy. That's why we always recommend a backdrop, whether chair mounted, wall mounted, but more importantly, provide space between your body and the background. And then consider chatting or doing a session in a location that is a few feet from the wall, just because of the contrast. And one of my fellow writers here gave me this tip for ASL interpreters specifically. Does your setup pass the father and table test? So if you're able to properly sign father and then table, that means your setup is good to go in terms of visuals, camera. So action. This is when you start interpreting. So, you know, you want to position yourself to start. You want to have your feet planted on the ground, back straight, head and shoulders in full view of the camera. You want to center your eyes on the screen and make sure that there's some space above your head. The camera should be facing you head on and not at an angle pointing up or down. You want to check your surroundings. So your background should be well lit, no large shadows. You want to angle your camera to only show you and your signing space, for sign language interpreters specifically. The camera camera view should exclude any views of the ceiling, floor, hallway, door, window, personal items, anything distracting. It should be definitely blank behind you and free from any clutter or distraction. And then remember your greeting. A lot of companies, so my company specifically, we always have the interpreter list their ID number, so make sure you know where to find that. If you don't, then ask your designated language agency. But the typical standard greeting is, hello, my name is Caroline, ID number 123456, Spanish interpreter, how may I help you? And then you go on to the pre-session. Step 6, this is just your basic work day stuff. So you want to remember to take breaks, get up, stretch, you know, give your voice a break, give your hands a break and your arms a break if you're a ASL interpreter, sign language interpreter. You don't want to get cotton-mouthed or have make it harder for the LEP to understand you, for example. So you want to make sure you give yourself a break so that you're able to actively and efficiently do your job. And then remember always to destroy or shred any notes that you take during sessions, so you're not divulging any PHI. Follow the standard code of ethics. Buslingo has its own standard code of ethics, and most language companies follow a lot of the national ones. I know that there are people on this presentation from all over the world, but I can provide examples, and a lot of them look a lot the same, but a lot of them are focused around confidentiality, privacy, PHI, excuse me. And then each platform has new features constantly being added. We're always trying to make the application more user-friendly and more useful for language consumers, and then also interpreters specifically, like you guys. I get feedback from my remote interpreter group all the time, and we are able to make the platform that we're building more user-friendly for them. So so always stay up to date. Just kind of a review here. Checklist. So you want to ready your workspace, check your technology, lights, camera, action, and then remember to stay calm. Try to have fun. So that's the end of my content. I would love to field any questions people have.
Thank you, Carolyn. That is an incredibly practical, important, hugely important presentation with a lot of content, and we have a lot of questions for you. So let me not waste people's time and get to them. One was immediate. It struck me too when you said it. You mentioned destroying PHI notes, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to know what PHI is. And sure enough, we have a question. What's PHI?
So PHI is protected health information. So if in the HIPAA compliance definition here, kind of explains protected health information, PHI. And if you're working remotely, obviously it's called ePHI, so electronic protected health information. Anything that's gonna be specific toward somebody's name, or be able to make it easily identifiable who this person was, basically.
And related to that, Carolyn, we had a few questions about how interpreters would get trained in HIPAA and HIPAA compliance.
Yeah, so there's a lot of online resources for that. I recommend one that we use at Boostlingo. It's just HIPAA compliance training or it's HIPAAtraining.com. And I think it's a $35 training course. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you have to take it every 2 years for it to be valid. But it just goes through it goes through the history of what HIPAA compliance is, what it means, what it does, and how to adhere to it.
And if you're going to be working anywhere in the field of healthcare interpreting in the United States, whether you interpret outside the United States for this country or in it, you really got to have that. So that was an important set of questions there.
Yeah.
Here's another one that Carolyn, I think you would know quite a little bit about, which is how could I apply for a job in this field of remote interpreting? Yes.
Great question. So it's going to be kind of different depending on the agency, but for example, sorry, I'm not trying to sell Boostlingo. I'm just it's just what I'm most familiar with. So on our website, you can go in and register using this online form we have, and you can then be referred to a company to work with. That's one way. Other ways are to, just standard ways of applying for jobs. You look for LinkedIn, or you check language service company websites to see if they're hiring, that kind of thing. And then it's also good to know, like, industry-wide, what are the main platforms. So Slater.com is a good resource for that. Nimdzi is a good resource for that as well. Boostlingo also keeps you guys up to date. We have a blog that talks about the different resources available out there for that kind of thing, professional development and applying for jobs.
Thank you. Someone is asking, what would be the ideal speed for internet, which is obviously important.
Yeah, so it's gonna be, so ideally, and I was talking to one of my developers yesterday because he always likes to keep me informed about this, but I think I had put it on one of the slides here, technology. For standard for upload speed, it should be for audio 100 kilobits per second, and then for video 1500 kilobits per second. And these are some tests that are really useful. We use Twilio a lot because that's the the provider we use for VRI specifically, or the network we use. So that one's just like a yes, no, do you have enough speed kind of thing. But I highly recommend checking all of these out for that.
And Carolyn, thank you. One question we've had quite a few times is, can they get the presentation from you if we send it out as a PDF?
Sure. Yeah. I'll get that to you so you can send it out.
So what that means is that when we send out to all of you registrants the link to access the recording for this webinar, we will also send out the link for the PowerPoint. Carolyn, someone is asking if you have a recommendation for a headset that would be ideal for remote interpreting.
Yeah, so there's a couple that I like, but one that I used in the office specifically is the Plantronics headset that has a built-in microphone and has Bluetooth. It's noise canceling. These are Bose headphones. They don't have a built-in external mic, so that's not super ideal. But I think, Marjorie, when we send out or when we post this, I'd love to be able to put actual links to equipment somewhere. Mm-hmm. So
I think that would be very appreciated.
Yeah, and I have also recommendations for backdrops.
Yeah, so a couple of questions have been, are virtual backdrops okay?
Virtual backdrops. So I know a lot of platforms do that, but some don't. So it's just always good to be aware of what the technology provides. Like Boostlingo, we don't have the virtual backdrops available yet, but it's in the scope to build those in as kind of filters, the way you can do on Zoom for example. But yeah, it just depends. It depends on
the
the
platform.
platform. Yeah.
Got it. Someone's asking about the difference between headphones with usual jack versus USB headphones. Is that an issue at all?
Like the ones that plug in versus Bluetooth, I'm assuming.
Well, it's usual jack versus USB. So it sounds like they both plug in.
Yeah, so it's always good. So like even for these ones, which are external and they don't have a USB jack, to have the option to plug them in just in case there are any issues. So I always recommend getting something as versatile as possible. With these, I have an external cord that I can plug into the computer if needed, if for whatever reason the Bluetooth doesn't work. So it's not one or the other is better, but it's always good to have options just in case.
We had a few questions about certain abbreviations, in particular AMD, APU, and HJD.
HJD.
And well, that's what someone wrote. Maybe the slide went away. Maybe it's not quite because the slide might have passed on to another slide by then.
Let me find where I had recommended those. Sorry, just a sec. So I remember, sorry, CPU, for example, is your central processing unit. It's or central processing unit for a computer, meaning it's the electronic circuitry that goes that's within the computer and executes instructions that make, it's basically the brain of the computer, if that helps. And then what was the other one?
Oh gosh, I've gone on to other questions. AMD,
Sorry.
APU, HJD. AMD, APU, HJD.
I don't think I even
Maybe
mentioned.
it was HD. Maybe it was just high def.
Oh yeah, HD, high definition. Oh, AMD, yeah. Some of these things are not, you don't have to memorize what they mean, but AMD is a type of CPU. It's a type of computer. Ouch, sorry. It's an advanced micro device. Basically, that includes all in one. It includes everything in one, which is good, but it means that it also, if one thing goes wrong, everything goes wrong, kind of thing. So yeah.
That's been our experience, interesting enough, with all-in-one computers too. So I will echo that recommendation.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I wouldn't pay too much attention to those acronyms. Just make sure you have a working computer that isn't older than 3 years and that you're testing things frequently to make sure that they work.
One question, thanks, Carolyn, is if there's a place where they can get an explanation of the technical terminology you've been using. The person says, I have a MacBook Pro and a desktop, but I have no idea what any of the technical parameters are or how to compare them with everything that you're mentioning. Is there a resource?
Yeah. So we actually have a technical spec document that I can share with you guys. Just to give you kind of a reference for what to look for when you're comparing your own product or your own device to what is recommended. So I think it would be easier if I just send that on to you guys as well with the other resources, just so it's a little bit cumbersome to explain it, line by line, because it's pretty technical.
But that would be a fantastic resource to share. Thank you. Here's a question about BooSlingo. Does BooSlingo differentiate their pool of interpreters by qualifications for clients? For example, certified versus non-certified interpreters.
It's a great question. So we have an algorithm that allows us to route based on those things. So based on language, based on specialized type, meaning what sort of level of certifications you have. Obviously, we do all different types of interpreting, community interpreting, But we do a lot of the most we do is medical and legal, and you have to have specific qualifications for those to be able to get those calls routed to you. So there is an algorithm that is able to route based on qualifications.
Super. This is a sad one, but it's kind of important. I live in a very rural area and don't have a lot of choices that she knows of for internet access. When I'm on Zoom, for example, I often get a message telling me my internet access is unstable and my landline service is actually VoIP and is also not very consistent. What can I do about improving both of these services? There are only 2 landline options available here and they're both terrible. My internet service is from Comcast and it's slower every day. Is this going to be a viable option for remote interpreter is my question after all that.
That's a great question, and I don't have a silver bullet answer for that one, unfortunately, because it really just depends who your IP is, who your internet provider is, and how you can adjust or enhance that. There are apparatuses you can get to enhance your bandwidth or your internet speed, but there's no silver bullet answer for that one, unfortunately. But yeah, if you're in a rural area, I'm actually, now that I'm thinking of it, there are external internet hotspots you can use, but they oftentimes will use the local, they'll feed off of the local internet providers too. So that's a good question. I'll have to think about that one and get back to you a little later.
Yes, I honestly suspect that she's not alone and that there are many interpreters in somewhat more remote or rural areas who might be interested in remote interpreting for that very reason, that they're a bit isolated, but that internet may prove to be an issue. So if there are hotspots they can purchase, that don't just depend on local, that would be quite something as a potential solution, but I don't know either. Using OPI or VRI, is that decided by the client or interpreter?
It could be both. I mean, obviously, if you don't want to, if you're not comfortable doing VRI, then you shouldn't do VRI. But like, for example, within BoostLingo, we're able to give certain permissions based on what the interpreter is comfortable with in the network that I run or manage. It's up to the interpreter. I always try to encourage interpreters to use VRI because it's more of a intimate human experience, especially now that there's on-site is so diminished. But yeah, it really depends on your provider. If you want to do audio or video, it's up to you, basically, is what I'm saying.
Got it. And does BoostLingo have 3-way call patient, provider, interpreter, for example?
That's a great question. So we have currently, we have audio to audio to audio, so 3-way audio. And then we also have audio to video to audio. And my developers are sprinting to get our 3-way, 4-way video feature developed by the end of the month. We are very much aware of the demand and the need for it. So they're working really hard to get that
and
done.
Related to that is 3-way call, same as RSI.
3-way call, same as RSI. No, it would not be. You would want to use, BoostLingo is not an RSI platform. It's only for consecutive interpreting at this point. There are other platforms that I'm not as familiar with that we can recommend, probably specifically within our writing group who know more about that can provide more detailed information. But Kudo is one of them, for example.
I'm not sure if this question is meant for interpreting how can I do to use BoostLingo in my smartphone? Or is that even an option?
Yeah, it's an option. But like I said, we recommend to use, if you are using a smartphone or a tablet, we always want it to be something stationary because you don't want to be walking around with your phone You know, it's not stationary, it's not HIPAA compliant, it's not very professional looking, but yes, the app does, sorry, background noise. The app does work in your smartphone for iOS and Android.
This question, I hope it's clear enough that you can answer it. It has to do with platforms for consecutive, not simultaneous. How do you control the interpreting mode is the question.
Interpreting mode. So this is kind of what it looks like on a current platform. And you have, I'm not sure what they mean by interpreting mode, but you're able to control your video and your audio. So if you are ever wanting to silence yourself or go into privacy mode, turn off your video at any point during the session, you're able to do that. I don't know, Marjorie, if you have a better answer for that.
I'm wondering if what they mean is, I'm not sure that the person who's asking the question understands that there's platforms that do that really specialize in consecutive, and then platforms that really specialize in remote simultaneous interpreting. And I know that now Zoom claims to have it simultaneous set up as an option. It's much more complicated, I think, than people realize, and is still in its infancy at Zoom. So I think probably it's more the confusion about consecutive and simultaneous in general, and the fact that if you're on a consecutive platform, sometimes things get urgent. Yeah, maybe you would have to go into something, but it's not really designed. A consecutive platform isn't really designed for that, is it?
No, it's not. It's really specifically designed for a consecutive platform like Boostlingo is really only designed for that, not for simultaneous at this point.
Someone asked, how good is the sound on the client's end? It's interesting.
We've heard great things, and from testing it, it's really good. We've worked hard to make improvements. This is a 4-year-old platform now, so constantly improving. But on the client side, yeah, it's kind of similar. When there are connection issues, it's not always your fault, right? So sometimes it could be the end user, the client who's dialing in, who is using an app or a phone or something that has bad network or bad bandwidth. But so it really depends on their diagnostics too. How well are they setting themselves up to have optimal technology?
All right. One more question. I'm looking, and there are many thanks, by the way. Is there a list of agencies who hire remote interpreters in the US?
That's a good question. I actually I'm not sure, because Boostlingo is just a technology platform. We don't actually contract or hire interpreters directly. We have language service company partners that do that part of it. So I think there must be some sort of registry somewhere. NIMSI maybe, I don't know.
In general these days, the large language companies pretty much all provide it, wouldn't you say? And an increasing number of the mid-sized ones do. So these days, a huge percentage of language companies in the mid-size and large size, surely they would offer it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
So to present yourself to as many of them as possible. Carolyn, this has been extraordinary. And there have been lots and lots of thanks in the chat and in the Q&A, and great appreciation. And many people are going to be downloading both the PowerPoint, which you've been kind enough to agree to share, and the recording of this webinar. So huge thanks to you. We apologize that a few of you had some technical difficulties. We don't know why. It could be because there have been at any given time between about 740 and 790 of you on, and we will be checking with Zoom about that. Fortunately, it was a small number, but we have not seen that before. Please email us if you need certificates. Try to do that within 24 hours so that we know that you were actually here. We can't give certificates late after the fact. We need to know that you actually attended. And meantime, there will be 2 more in this wonderful series. 2 more, let me make myself visible. 2 more presentations, webinars in this series on remote interpreting, all of them by authors of the future textbook that we hope to see coming out later this year on the remote interpreter. And we will be bidding a fond farewell for now to Carolyn. I will stay on for a few more minutes if there are general questions. I cannot answer technical questions. I have none of Carolyn's amazing expertise in this field, but we are really grateful, Carolyn. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Very valuable time. So have a wonderful rest of your day, which will be longer now because you're 3 hours behind us on the West Coast in California. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.